Welcome to Passport to Wealth. I'm your host, Arielle Tucker, certified financial planner and fellow U.S. expat. On this show, we bring together cross-border experts and global Americans to help you make confident decisions about your life, your money, and your next move abroad. Let's get started. Welcome back to Passport to Wealth. My name is Arielle Tucker. If you're an American thinking about moving to Canada right now, and a lot of people are, the assumption most people make is that it's an easy move. Same continent, similar culture, English speaking. Well, there is some French speaking, as you and I know, Brian.
That's right.
And then they get there and they realize the financial system isn't an entirely different world. Brian Wruk has been untangling that world for people since 1997. He's a CFP in both countries and a dual citizen. He's written the books, literally, The Canadian in America and The American in Canada. And he founded Transition Financial Advisors Group specifically for people making this crossing. Brian, thank you so much for joining us on Passport to Wealth today.
It's my pleasure, Arielle. No problem at all. I'm happy to talk about what I love.
You know, when we first jumped on this call, I was surprised because you have very much a heavy Canadian accent. I know you're currently based in Arizona, correct?
I am in Arizona now. I've been here since 1996. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So talk me through your own personal transition from Canada to the U.S.
yeah. Well, it's an interesting journey. Believe it or not, I've always had a fascination with the United States, and I have wanted to move down there. And even in high school, I was part of the band. I played percussion, and we took a band trip down to Portland, Oregon. And I love the trip, and I thought, man, this is kind of interesting. And then in grade 12, I did a trip with Campus Life down to LA, where we experienced Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland, the oceans, the beaches, the warm weather. And at that point in time, I was hooked. And so I said, when I got back to Canada, I started applying jobs at Disney and everything out of high school. I was a little bit naive. And I just have always been fascinated and wanted to live in the United States. I eventually, that dream kind of died. I didn't, nobody's going to pay to immigrate me down there to work at Disneyland.
Well, that was my question. I was like, were high schoolers able to immigrate? Not to age you, Brian, but I wasn't sure if immigration was an easier process.
No, it's a big issue, of course. It's one of the things that we've dealt with over the years, So I let that dream kind of die for the moment, and I joined a telephone company in Canada and started working there. And then I had a chance to do my graduate work. And so I applied at several schools in the United States, and I ended up getting accepted at University of Southern California and University of Arizona. And a friend of mine who I grew up with in Sherwood Park, Alberta, just outside Edmonton, was teaching in the economics department at University of Arizona. So I called him up and he said, yeah, come down here. Tuition was better, that kind of thing. So I packed a truck and drove down, and I ended up meeting my wife there. And we kind of went, sort of traveling a little bit back and forth between Canada. She met my family. We eventually got married at the end of my graduate work. And for some reason that befuddles me to this day, we moved back up to Canada. I had a job. I was on leave of absence. My company had supported me. And so we moved to Calgary. And that's when I learned some of the complexities of moving an American citizen to Canada. And we were just poor students. We didn't have much money and that kind of thing, but having to file a tax return for her every year, married filing separately, declaring foreign accounts, which wasn't that big a deal back then. It is now. So yeah, it was a taxing little exercise. And then I realized after 4 years in Calgary, and my wife is from Arizona, she didn't like the weather, that kind of thing. I realized I'm waking up next to a green card every day. So we moved down that path. And as a Canadian married to an American citizen, once you've been married for 3 years and have a green card, you're eligible for citizenship. So we went and got our green card. I moved down to the States and started then with a company called Keats Connolly. And Robert Keats is a Canadian. He's kind of the grandpappy of Canada US planning. His firm is now no longer in existence. He's retired. I work for them. So I read his book. He was in Arizona. So we moved down, and after 3 years, I got my citizenship in 1999, and finally realized my dream of being in the United States. And then working right in this area with Canadians looking to relocate to both countries back and forth. That's how I cut my teeth in this business. So that's kind of my journey.
I mean, I say this all the time, especially in our Passport to Wealth community. People who have lived the experience approach the planning differently because it's so much more than just a financial plan. It is all of the lived life experience of how do you move, how do you navigate all of that, what's the emotional side of things. That's really the important piece.
Absolutely. The experience of being, again, born and raised in Canada, learning the culture and that, and then moving back and forth and getting experience in both sides, and then actually moving yourself. So I moved my wife up to Canada, and then we moved back down to the States and dealing with things like immigration, customs, like getting her up there. When we landed, we were told, well, you've basically broken like 3 immigration laws. We had to get a minister's permit at the
Oh
time
my
to allow
gosh.
her into the country, to show our wedding, marriage certificate, I should say. And so it was just, yeah, that's when my eyes were open to the complexity of this whole thing. You know what I mean? So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Experience matters, and it matters a lot.
Did you find it was easier to move into Canada or into the US? Was one move one way easier than the other?
The move to Canada was easier. She didn't require a whole lot of sort of the medical background. When I moved to the States, I had to get an X-ray to make sure I didn't have TB. I needed to get a medical clearance and a lot of that kind of stuff. That would be the only part that I'd say is a little bit more difficult. I don't know what that's like today. I mean, we were talking about
Mhm.
back in 1999, moving to the States. The current administration, I think that's a little bit more difficult, and they're scrutinizing things a little bit greater detail.
Actually, that kind of is a good transition point, talking about kind of how policy can impact immigration. What are you seeing from your clients? Like I call them mixed families, right? You have one who's a citizen of the US or Canada and then one who isn't. How are you seeing that, or how are you helping support families through those transitions across
Yeah,
borders right now?
it's interesting in my career. There's always something that will trigger either people to move to Canada or they will move from Canada to the United States. So, for example, when same-sex marriage was approved in Canada, we got a lot of calls of people wanting to move up there for obviously same-sex marriage. Then they approved that down here. The oil industry, when the price of oil was really high and the exchange rate was more on parity, you saw more people sort of moving down this way from particularly Alberta, Saskatchewan, down to Houston, Dallas, Oklahoma. We got a lot of business that way. What we're seeing now is with the current administration eliminating a lot of the DEI, we have a lot of the LGBTQ plus community moving up to Canada, and parents with trans kids. We've done a lot of work in that area the last while. So it just depends on what's happening, and and everybody has their reason for moving to whatever country. Some people, we're getting a lot of calls now. Oh, the Liberals are in power in Canada again and they want to move. That's fine. We are agnostic when it comes to the reasons why, but people have their own individual reasons, and we respect that, and we'll help them with the complexities of that move.
And I know, I mean, it's been you moved here in 1999, so things have changed. But from your observation working with all these families, do you think it's become more complex to live and invest across both countries, or is it kind of held steady and it just kind of depends on who's in power and what the rules are at that time?
The complexity is still there, particularly when the IRS brought in all the FATCA rules. That
Hmm.
added a lot more complexity because you have
Yep.
the report of foreign accounts, a lot of that stuff. What's happened though is I think the industry has changed to be able to accommodate and work with those people a little bit better. Schwab has got a pretty good international department now. A lot of these custodians are now being a little bit more flexible or develop policies and procedures to allow IRAs to remain in the United States, for example. So
Hmm.
that's been a big improvement in being able to service these people.
Hmm. Do
Yeah.
you often see the same families are moving across multiple times, or do people kind of move and settle? What kind of trends do you see?
We're seeing more people are moving and staying. This current administration's got a lot of people questioning that have moved down here and they're considering moving back. We've had a number of clients sort of say, you know what, kind of done with the States, but it's generally for lifestyle reasons. The
Hmm.
current administration is pushing some of that thinking, but it's getting them to go, you know what? We don't really have much for friends here anymore. We're retired. We're going to move back where we have family. And that's one of the primary things, Arielle, that I tell clients: you never move for to save taxes or to do it is a lifestyle decision. Do you want to be closer to family, to grandkids, to children? What's the lifestyle? And that's basically the essence of what we do and what financial planning is all about. Where are you going? Where are you at? How are you going to get there? Is it feasible? And so
Hmm.
helping clients understand what their overall lifestyle is, and saying, look, if you move to Canada, we can run a set of financial projections for you to say, yeah, you know what, with your net worth and your nest egg, you're going to still be able to live up there. Maybe the taxes are higher, that kind of thing, but who cares? You want to get closer to family? That's what's important at the end of the day, you know?
Yep.
And we do some of our long-term care planning with people down here. So if your spouse were to pass away, for example, where would you want to go live? Would you stay in Houston or would you move up to Calgary? Well, I'd probably want to be closer in Calgary because I have kids that can come visit me, that kind of thing. Okay, well, that's something that we need to look at.
Hmm. Yeah, actually, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I am really
Sure.
curious, right? And I grew up going down to Florida, and you would see all the snowbirds. A lot of them were from Canada. I remember that very like hanging out and meeting all these Canadians on vacation every year. So I am really curious. How do you guys navigate that for families who maybe have their retirement plans and then someone passes away in the US and they decide to go repatriate? What does that process look like?
Yeah. If they were working with us, we generally get a good U.S. estate plan in place. There's a couple of oops and aha moments in that. So, for example, if you move from Canada down to the States and set up a revocable living trust, which is a common estate planning tool down here, they're not aware of the non resident trust rules in Canada. That basically, if you leave Canada, set up a trust with a Canadian beneficiary in it within 5 years of moving, Canada then deems that trust taxable in Canada. So it's a little bit tricky from that perspective. And again, this is where the niche exists just like yours. There's these little oops and aha moments. So they move down. Oh, an estate planning attorney, you got to go see that. Yeah, we'll set up a trust. And they don't realize about some of these landmines. And trusts are taxed very punitively in Canada. So that's one thing.
I just want to better understand that process, right?
Yeah.
Of you move, you have your retirement plan, right? We kind of have the go go
Okay.
years, the slow go years, and then we have the
Yeah.
no go years. And once we get into those no go years, you might not want to be sitting on the beach in Florida anymore. You might want to be up and near your daughter or your kids or your grandkids right back in Canada. And so I'm just
Right.
curious, like, how do you plan for those kind of different periods in retirement?
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing is that, for example, something like estate planning, you basically got to wind up your revocable living trust and move everything out of it before you move because trusts are taxed very punitively in Canada. That's one thing. Your brokerage account, your after tax account has to be moved up to Canada. So making sure you have the right investments in there to begin with is something that's really important. For example, you can't transfer mutual funds up there. So those all have to be liquidated, causing a tax burden down here. So if you can just transfer it wholesale, that's another thing to look at. Tracking cost basis when you enter Canada, you get a step up in basis of all your assets, taxable assets, when you enter Canada. Now you got to track that in Canadian dollars, and the
Mm.
US dollars you have to track in US dollars, and it has a different cost basis from when you originally bought it, that kind of thing. So there's just a lot of planning and thinking you have to do. And you understand, I mean, you're moving for lifestyle, but you're not moving to a tax haven in Canada. With
I
tax
know.
rates at 50% plus, it behooves you to do some pre-entry planning. For example, one idea is maybe you want to look at incurring some tax now, rolling an IRA to a Roth. Roth's made it in the last fifth protocol of the Canada-U.S. tax treaty in the last negotiations. In the equivalent in Canada is called a tax-free savings account, TFSA. That did not make it into the treaty. So Roth IRAs remain their tax-free status when you move to Canada, as long as you don't make a contribution to it when you are in Canada. Otherwise, you lose all the tax-free status. Another oops and aha moment.
Wow, that's a gotcha.
Right? So, and then, but the TFSA, everybody say, oh, you need to set up a TFSA, it's tax-free. Well, you gotta look at the numbers, because TFSAs are fully taxable in the US. So now you have phantom income that you're not allowed to take foreign tax credit against. So now you're paying out of pocket down there. So those are the kind of things you got to be aware of, but it may make sense, especially if you can plan in advance. Like we've helped clients that say, in 3-4 years, I'm planning on moving back up to Canada, be closer to family and that kind of thing. We'll do Roth conversions every year, emptying out a whole 800, $1,000 million IRA into a Roth. Yeah, they're paying tax every year, but they get up there and all that money is tax-free from a Canadian perspective. So yeah, that's a big one, for example.
That's a huge one. And I'm so glad this was a great example, because this example obviously applies to Canada, but I also see this with pretty much every country that we work with, where we have these unequal, unbalanced systems. Somehow Canada has decided to accept the Roth, right, in the treaty, but then on the US side, they didn't accept the equivalent program. I see that all the time, right?
Yep.
And then every single one of these agreements is different. So it's a perfect example of a classic gotcha. So thank you for that excellent
Yeah.
example. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about what your 50% plus tax rate is getting you in Canada. And the thing that I always hear about, right, and I grew up in New York, just across the border, about an hour away from the Canadian border, I would always hear about the healthcare, free healthcare in Canada. Can
Yep.
you speak a little bit to kind of what does free healthcare in Canada actually mean, and what is your experience with that?
Yeah. So basically, it is socialized medicine, it's socialized healthcare. So everybody has access to the healthcare system up there. All you have to do is show in my case, it was my Alberta healthcare card. And in you go. You can go to the ER. They have now some more like sort of urgent care clinics, that kind of thing. The main problem is, though, is that you need a primary care physician that kind of governs and can then help you get into the ER, get to the hospital, and that kind of thing. Problem is that they're so short of primary care physicians that the waiting period right now, places like Ontario, is 3 years. So your
Wait,
only
3
choice,
years to get a
3
primary
years
care
to get a
physician?
primary care physician.
Whoa, okay.
So your choice then when you need medical care is generally to just go to the ER. Well, though that system is overburdened, and you probably read stories recently of people
Mhm.
bleeding out in the ER, a guy having a heart attack in the ER and passing away. The wait time is 8 hours, 16 hours sometimes to get care. So that's one of the problems. Canadian healthcare has been a source of pride for Canadians for a long period of time. You know what I mean? And should be. I mean, the fact that
Mhm.
universal healthcare, you can go in and get care, is great. But the system has deteriorated over the years, I think, with the increase in expenses, the burden on the system with the boomers and that kind of thing. Plus, under the Trudeau years, Justin, that is, they allowed a lot of immigration. I think there's probably I think 1 million or 2 million people that were immigrated into Canada. It's created quite a burden on the system per se. So unfortunately, the system has kind of deteriorated a bit. I'll give you a case in point. So my aunt was in the hospital. I was happened to be up visiting family, and we went to the Royal Alexander Hospital in Edmonton. Great hospital. I've been in that hospital many a time. And we went up and we got the doors open to the unit, and there's like carts and trays and patients and stretchers and everything sort of down the hallway. We went and asked, like, "Where's my aunt?" And she, "Oh, over this room here." We went around, and it's a 4-bedroom unit, and my aunt was the 5th bed stuck in the corner, kind of in the
Whoa.
dark, okay?
Whoa.
And they just are so over capacity. And so we visited with her, and I went to leave, I gave her a hug, and I kinda like, "Auntie, you have they been, like, giving you sponge baths or whatever here?" And she's like, "Well, no, but they're really busy," and that kinda thing. And, she goes, "I'm hoping one of the lady over here is supposed to move because then I can get, a bed by the window," and that kinda thing. So there's been just a real influx and a burden on the system, and I know they allowed a lot of the immigration, that kinda thing, but they need to invest also in infrastructure, which the schools, the hospitals, the roads, a lot of that. I'm not sure that they've caught up with that. So there's been a bit of a deterioration, and actually people are living there or people are considering moving there are actually starting to question, okay, why am I paying all these taxes? If I'm getting less service and the service is deteriorated, particularly in healthcare,
Mhm.
why am I paying these higher tax rates?
I'm curious, is there like a private insurance option? Like if someone's moving into Canada and they're like, look, I can't wait 3 years for service, can they access like a private system in a way? Or
There
what do
is
people
some of
do?
that going on, yeah, and it's being built out, and it's funny because a lot of the members of parliament, are crossing the crossing the border, getting their MRIs done, getting their CAT scans done, because the waiting period is so long, in Canada for a lot of that non-destructive testing. And, the other thing too is a lot of hospitals along the border are offering package deals for people. Like, you want a knee replacement? Come on down, $25,000. We'll replace your knee, help you get rehab, and then send you back. But there is now, there's a lawsuit in Quebec a number of years ago that basically authorized private care to start coming in. And so that is start making its way across Canada. There's still restrictions on it, but it is starting to make its way. There's private, again, CT scans, MRIs, a lot of that stuff now is starting to happen up there. And a lot of concierge type doctors as well, where you can
Mhm.
pay privately and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I think it's such an important consideration if you're moving across borders to really think through what are you going to get from a healthcare perspective. I mean, I grew up in the States, so I was used to, US medical care. We moved to Germany for a while and it was very affordable, right? Paying through government insurance. But the quality that you would receive is different, right? It's
Yeah.
a different system, right? They pay for it differently. Your experience is different. And so we ended up doing like an additional like private supplement. And I just tell people to really understand what your expectations are and make sure whatever you're expecting that's like aligned. Because if you're expecting, US gold standard, you had a corporate health insurance package and you go anywhere else in the world, you may have a very different experience.
Yeah. In my experience, and like I said, I've been doing this for 30 some odd years, and I've been in the hospital and medical system in Canada. I've been in the hospital and medical system here in the US. In my opinion, I think it is a combination of both systems that is probably the ideal. And I think that's
Mhm.
kind of where they've ended up, like in places like France and Germany. So you have a basic universal health care,
Yep.
which I'm not a fan of socialized medicine, but I don't know how you get to universal health care without going through the socialized medicine
Mhm.
weed path. You know what I mean? I think there's a combination where here you got people that can get basic care. Carolyn McClanahan is an advisor here in the United States, and she was a physician turned advisor, and she's come up with plans on how we could get universal health care here relatively easy. But then have a private system for those that can afford it to go ahead and do that. The system in the United States is very expensive, but you do get care and you get access. And so
Mhm.
I think some kind of a combination between the two is probably the ideal solution of what you're going to get. But with Congress being so divided and all
Yep.
that, not much is getting done in that area, unfortunately.
I will say on that note, I am very thankful to not have to see the GoFundMes or when I see GoFundMe's for people on Facebook that I went to high school, like it seems like living in Europe, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you have to like ask for help, have people help pay your medical bills. Like it now, like living outside of that for so long, it seems
Yeah.
like a crazy thing that we have to do
Yeah.
in the US. And so, yeah, I'm
It's
also
tragic,
hoping.
in my
Yeah,
opinion. There's a lot of, and
totally.
again, if we get just some preventative care, that would
Hmm.
solve a lot of the problems. And so, yeah, and you know what? If you're an entrepreneur and you come out of university and you want to create something, well, how do you get healthcare? So you have a lot of people running around with no healthcare, which puts a burden on, the hospitals because they have to treat you, or you get a wrongful death suit or something like that. It's a real problem in Canada. If you're entrepreneurial, you can go start your own, but you have healthcare. You have your Alberta healthcare card or OHIP card. So yeah, it's definitely, both systems need to be improved for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I know we went a little over into healthcare, but I want to just ask you one final question. If someone was to approach you about moving from one side to the other, it doesn't matter. What would be one tip of advice that you would tell them right now?
Do your planning. A move from Arizona to California or California to Arizona is not like a move from Montana to Alberta.
Mm.
The laws and the things that you need to be aware of, these oops and aha moments, seek out the right advice in advance and do your planning if you can. I mean, I literally have had people, call me up and say, "Hey, I'm interested in getting some planning. I'm moving to Canada. What should I be looking out for?" And I said, "Well, when are you moving?" "Well, I'm in the airport in New York. I'm about to get board a plane." I'm kind of going, "Well, we're kind of handcuffed at this point. There's not a lot you can do, but think it through. Read my book. There's a lot of information online now. At least educate yourself a little bit. And then you have to make a decision. Do you want to do something on your own to figure out yourself? Do you want to do something where you can get an hourly engagement, which we don't necessarily do? Or do you want to hire an advisor that's going to help you plan it, do it before, during, and after your move, and handhold you through the whole process? And if you want to move back, we can continue to help you all the way back. That's one of the main things, is just the pitfalls, and you don't know what you don't know. And that's where the biggest problem comes in.
Yeah. And I know so many of us cross-border advisors, we started our careers because of the pain points that we experienced, right? We had to figure it out. I was also married to a poor student when we first moved abroad, and I am so thankful we were broke when
Yep.
we had to figure it all out because there wasn't a lot of money at stake when we were making mistakes.
Yeah,
And learned so much from moving back and forth, and then just being
exactly.
a nerd
Yeah,
about it.
and the
So.
culture too, you understand things. I
Mhm.
mean, being from America, you understand, and it's the same thing, and our staff now, we've got, an American that moved up to Canada. We've got another one born and raised in my hometown of Edmonton, now living in the States. We've got employees. We're hiring Canadians now. We've got our tax lead in Alberta, and we got somebody in Nova Scotia, but we've got people that have lived it, real life
Mhm.
experience, and that designations accordingly. So it's been a pleasure sort of mentoring and coaching people along the years as well. So love what I do, and if you love what you do, there's nothing to retire from. So
Brian, you are such an OG in this space. Thank you so much for joining us on
well, thank
Passport to
you.
Wealth. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
The content shared in this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial, tax, or legal advice. We encourage you to consult with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, or other licensed expert before making any decisions based on the topics discussed. Everyone's financial situation is unique, and personalized guidance from a trusted professional is the best way to ensure your choices align with your individual goals and circumstances.